Hey, Scott Fresener here with t-biz TV, and I'm talking to my very good friend Richard Greaves. And Richard is you're in Detroit, right?
South of Detroit.
With no snow on the ground today.
All melted. I found the keys that I lost snow shoveling.
Well, today's the first day of spring, so there should be no snow, right? So,
You know, they look pretty bad. They look pretty bad.
or
All
did you
rust.
lose them when you were shoveling snow?
I came in and I want to know where they are, but there they are. Made me very happy.
It was a whole set. Holy crap! Like finding them on the couch, huh?
Yep.
Richard is working. You're what's your title today? Self-described recluse.
I'm always looking for trouble.
Okay.
So, the only
Industry
thing,
consultant, industry author, lecturer, been around a long time. We know that. And Richard and I are good friends. And right now you're working out of beautiful Detroit. And you just got back from the Atlantic ISS show, Atlantic
Right.
City. And you called me from the middle of Cleveland or middle of Ohio driving last week. And then an hour later, I saw there was this huge traffic pile up. And I thought, holy crap, I think Richard called me from right there. And so anyway, so I'm guessing you made it well okay.
yeah, I made it no problem.
Now, was there snow in Atlantic City? There was no snow there?
Oh, there was no snow there. It was as cold as 18 degrees, and the wind was a gale force wind.
Well, that's Atlantic City. You walk between buildings, and it's like it blows you away.
I got out of the car, put my suitcase there, and my suitcase was knocked down and then pushed along. So,
That's what I miss about that show. I haven't been to that show, and we're talking today because you went to the show. I didn't go to the show. I had more of my East Coast people saying, "You're going to be there, Scott," and I'm going, "Nah." You weren't my surrogate, but you were kind of, but you were there, and I asked you to kind of snoop around, which you will anyway.
I should have taken more pictures.
Well, they're funny about that. I'm back in graces with ISS, but they still said no pictures on the show floor, Scott. And everybody takes a picture. You put your phone up to your ear and act like you're talking to somebody, and you snap a pic. So anyway, but next time. But I've been to that show probably in 4 years, and last time I was there, it was a good show. I mean, that show really brought in the Upper East Coast people. It was very busy. Was the show traffic busy?
I think so. I remember that about 3 or 4 years ago, it was really busy, and it was a real high point. Now it just seemed like the normal traffic, but people were very energetic. People were buying. The seminar rooms had more people than I remember in a long time. Rick Davis told me that he had sometimes 50 plus and 70 plus people in his
That's big
seminar.
numbers.
Well,
You and I both
I
know
haven't seen those numbers in ages.
we've gone. Those numbers were, in the early days, we'd have 200 or 300, and then it dropped down to 20, and maybe 10 on a good day sometimes. So that's good. I think the seminars are a good
Let's
indication of the show.
breakfast.
Yeah, so that's good. That's good news. I always judge the show by how the seminars were attended, and I think that's good news. And I think people probably had a lot of pent up from being pent up with all the snow.
Now they got swamped with a snowstorm about 6 hours after we left.
Yeah,
So the whole
yeah.
East Coast got another snowstorm on Monday.
You think there were more exhibitors, or could you really tell?
No, I mean, part of what I'm going to mention today was that I saw people that had never had booths before, and people, new people that I knew. So
So it wasn't down to a 4 or 5 aisle show, which some of the ISS shows had gotten to.
no, it was just as big as it's always been. In fact, maybe even a little bit bigger. They went further down into whatever that hall is. It just seemed like there was a lot more people. Yes,
Yeah,
or a lot
cool.
more booths. 250, I think.
That's a lot. That's a lot of booze. And was the beer thing next door? That show always had a beer.
There
Not
was
a
no
beer
show next
convention.
door at all. No.
Though it used to be because my boys always like to drink their beer, so they'd go next door to the beer tasting show or whatever it was. So anyway, so tell me what's new at the show. I know you went there with an agenda. You kind of had your things you wanted to do, and you snipped things out. I know your style. You're kind of a detective sometimes. So what did you discover at ISS that turned you on? Rumors you heard that you were surprised at, and anyway.
Well, my big point, my big agenda was to go talk to Kevin Sweeney, the CEO of Triangle, and to go see Rick Davis, who's been a friend of mine for 35 years.
And
I'm
Rick is now
using,
working with Triangle.
yes,
Yeah.
Rick Davis started with Triangle, I don't know, maybe about 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah.
And so I should have the in there, but he wasn't exactly sure about the viscosity drop with their Phoenix White. Now, Multicraft of Cleveland, Ohio, actually distributes it under their own label, but it's Phoenix White that they sell. And I'm just having a real hard time trying to print it fast. It prints fine on the number 2 setting of the automatic press, but that's not who I am. I want to be printing at 10 or 11, as the Spinal Tap people might say.
And not,
And so,
not to interrupt you, but you're working in a shop kind of casually now, helping out or whatever, and so you're getting some
I've got consulting.
current hands-on. I mean, you have a lot of hands-on, but I mean, in the last couple of years, maybe not. But you're working in a shop and doing some work now, so you've had hands-on with this.
Yes. And I just, the idea that you slow down the press to print a white ink drives me insane. The idea that every ink manufacturer on the face of the world will tell you, well, don't take it right out of the bucket, stir it first. And when you're stirring, you're literally at a very, very high speed, and that's what breaks down the pseudo-plasticity of the screen printing ink. And what makes things a screen printing ink, certainly something I've been teaching for 30 years and in the seminars that I've given, is that all screen printing inks are multi-viscosity. They change viscosity when you shear them. Rolflex, invented the word shear. It seemed they were the ones that really pulled it out of their hat 20 or 30 years ago. But I'm talking to Kevin Sweeney, the CEO of Triangle, and he says, no, Phoenix it's 12,000 centipoise, and it shouldn't break down at all. My customers like it nice and thick like that. So this would make it Newtonian for people that care about that sort of thing. And I literally stopped listening to him after that. Sorry, Kevin. But the idea that the ink doesn't... Now, he is sending me some secret stuff in a brown apothecary bottle that is going to lower it.
Right.
But a Newtonian fluid is not something that does not change viscosity. I don't want to slow down the press either. You're right. If we're flashing, that gives me 4 or 5 seconds that I've got to hold off then. But I have other inks that I've used in the past.
Yeah.
And Pierre is super loyal to Multicraft. He wants to use anything that Multicraft is just.
Who is Pierre?
Pierre Yamnishi is a screen printer who's been printing an award-winning ISS screen printer. He's part of the new Keiretsu with Greg Kitson, but he runs the Shirtboard. That's how most people might know him. The Shirtboard is an offshoot of your old board, and when certain people turned into trolls, he and Andy Maines up in Marin County and Dot Tone Dan Campbell, ex-Disney guy, now working for M&R, their electronic division, working under Jeff Baxter as a tech.
Back up. Who's working for M&R as a tech?
Dot Tone Dan.
I didn't know that.
Dan Campbell.
I know Dan Campbell really well. I didn't know he had started his own little business. I knew he wasn't probably doing really well with it, and I am blown away. See, I just figured.
He's moving to Tennessee.
Wow. He didn't move from Florida, though, did he?
He's moving to Tennessee. I think he's got relatives there.
We'll have to go hang out with him now when I live in Kentucky in the summer. No, I didn't mean to get you off
Nashville,
track,
baby.
by the way.
We're all getting together at the Nashville ISS show.
Now, Pierre, back to the Pierre story. Pierre's company is
it's Blue Moon Promotion.
Blue Moon Promotion out of Cleveland, right?
Right. The only other people I knew in Cleveland were Jack's Prints, and they're in a different category. Pierre's a contract printer. He only prints high-level stuff. He doesn't. I don't see much in his shop that is 1 or 2 color. Yeah. They seem to send him tough stuff. And Dan Campbell is doing a lot of his artwork.
Right.
They've been partners in the Shirtboard, and he farms out almost all of his work to Dan Campbell.
But Pierre uses the Triangle White because he gets it locally from Multicraft, but what else is he looking at then? If you don't like it, what else is he looking at?
Well, we did walk over to my friend Jeff Proctor's booth, where Jeff Proctor is the U.S. representative for Discover Lancer Group. And I asked Jim Chalice, who is the president of Lancer International, who I've known for 25 years. Yeah, and he said, well, no, our Arctic White has a 120,000 centipoise, which everybody seemed that was their white ink starting point. But he says that drops right down to 80 as soon as you start to print with it. Yeah. And that's just what I want to hear. But unfortunately, Multitech doesn't,
I think I think Lancer is a good product, and I don't think they get the right rap or in the U.S. I don't know what it is, but because you've got the big players in the U.S., the Rutlands and Union and Poly One, but I don't think Lancer has ever cracked it totally. Maybe I'm wrong, but I go to the shows. I know Jim. I've known him for years, and it looks like it's really good goop. I hear good things from people that use it, but I don't think they get the distribution that the other guys get. I don't know why. You know.
Well, the idea that Jim knew instantly what I was looking for, it made me feel much better because my heart just dropped when Kevin Sweeney told me, no, ours doesn't drop at all. Mm-hmm. And so that just bothered me. Have I been wrong somehow? But Jim he knew the numbers right off the top of his head.
He's a smart guy, yeah.
Right, so I asked him, so what has the best drop of all your? Oh, he says our 500 series. It's got even more drop than that.
That's his Arctic. What's he call it? Arctic White or
Arctic White.
Right. And
I'm getting some because it's being shipped into Cleveland, and I'll have some next week.
Where do they distribute in the U.S.? So they ship from Canada, or they have a?
It's in Winnipeg. It all has to come over the border, and they have quite a few distributors. Davis International is a distributor. Jeff Proctor's always telling me where he's going, so he's all over the country. They've got reps all over.
Right.
And I used tons of Lancer product with the consulting clients I had in Toronto and Winnipeg. So I've used it a lot because it was a local brand. They used to be they looked to me like they were a Union clone, and I think they were a royalty, or what do you call that, a licensed.
Yeah, years ago there was something there.
Ago.
Yeah, years ago I think either they were a licensee or they were a distributor possibly. So anyway. So you're going to try. I'd be really curious how you make out with his ink, though. You're going to report back on our next meeting here online and tell me what.
Well, I'm excited because I want the press to go faster because boom, click. When the press is not spinning, you're not making any money. Mm-hmm. So slowing the press down, that's.
What does Pierre have for an automatic?
He's got an MHM.
Oh,
and
well.
It'd be very hard to pry any MHM product out of his hands.
Those guys have you and I know when you travel worldwide, you see a ton of MHM. In the U.S., M&R is pretty well sewed up, and now you got S-Rock. But MHM globally, you walk into a shop that's got MHM, and those are pretty happy campers, I think.
Just from their pin registration or their film positioning machine alone, that does speed things up as long as the man in the screen making room is registering them correctly, and boom, you just pop the screens in. It's a pin registration system before there was pin registration systems.
Yeah, no, those guys are on top of it. You gave me a couple notes, or you talked about Rob Coleman.
Right. Well, as part of what seems like a water base eruption, I wouldn't even call it an evolution.
And you feel that way. I mean, you felt. Well, I feel.
The bigs, the companies. Wilflex has always had a water base, and of course, I'm a Pavonine, Charlie Leach aficionado. Charlie Leach,
the cobwebs.
Charlie Leach is the greatest man, the greatest evangelist of all water-based ink.
But no one would listen. Too bad. I mean, you and I both know. I mean, I used to show water-based in class, and no one wanted to hear about it.
I would see him at shows, and I'd make a beeline. Charlie, what do you got? Richard, look at this. And
I know. It's always...
He was a master, and I started to use water-based ink when Terry Kaiserman taught me how to make my own water-based inks in the early 80s. And when you can make a water-based ink in almost any color for $4 a gallon, still.
I know.
Now that's if you want to make it. That's a gourmet. You got to get all the component parts and decide to take become a real chef.
Yeah.
But,
well, you and I have both traveled the world, and in a lot of the foreign countries, you go in and you try and show them something, and they go, no, we make it right here,
They use gasoline to clean up too. So
yeah. So anyway, so what did he tell you?
A water base in higher distribution levels. So NASDAR, I apologize to Peter Walsh ahead of time when he sees this, but I don't know what water base they actually sold before. But Magnacolors, the English company Magnacolors, which I used overseas, they're distributing it now. They have, I guess, for about a couple of years, but now it just seems like Rob's on fire. He's got his iPad out. He's got pictures to show you. He's walking around. Feel this. I was entranced. I was ready to start immediately as if I, and I know a lot about water-based ink. We also have Jesse Martinez, who you remember was at Ryan for a little while, and I've worked with Jesse in the past in lots of different places where he's worked. but he's now the Matsui water-based distributor for the United States. Now, it may be that I never knew enough Matsui people, but it was always a factory thing. You had to call the factory, and I never knew a rep. This is not the case. They've got booths. They're going to be in Nashville also.
And we talked earlier. I don't think they were ever at shows other than ISS Long Beach. Or I don't think you ever saw them in Atlantic City. For them to go all the way across the country and do that. And Jesse called me the other day, and he is the evangelist. I'm telling you what, he was. You could tell he's on a high about their new water, not their new water base, but their improved water base and their additives and flow control and anti-drying and colors. And he was going on and on. So he's a good guy, by the way. I think that's great.
Now, I used to deal with some water-based people when I was in California, and those little distributors or people that were just sort of mixing their own and distributing in the things like photochromatic or thermochromatic inks, they seem to have dried up because they were expensive, very impressive novelties. I had a guy named Greg ask me specifically, where can I get photochromatic inks? And, call me if you find them. But unfortunately, it's only gallons. And a gallon of photochromatic, I don't want to think of what that costs, but
probably
I think
$200. I don't know.
No, I think you have to sell your house or something.
Probably so. Yeah. So Jesse was working a booth though, and they had a booth, and he was showing samples and all that.
And all over the show. So
now I didn't know this, and maybe we're talking out of school, but he had mentioned that Ryanette used to be had bought and was selling Matsui through their dealers, but that deal fell out. So I think that's why maybe they're now branching out and trying to get to users, because I think Ryanette was kind of pushing their products for a while, and that deal, I guess, is over.
Well, Ryanette definitely tries a lot of things, and a lot of things they haven't survived with. The internet mentality that Ryanette is superb at just may not be, maybe it wasn't a good fix, but water-based for all those lower level people that are learning screen printing that live on the Ryanette videos, it could have been a good match. But
I have found though, and you probably have too, you take a guy that's been printing plastisol for years and years, and it's a hard sell, and it's hard to break their habits of plastisol. But a new guy who's just starting out and wants soft hand, and does his homework on the internet, because I deal with those guys now for separations, and you can tell they're evangelists. But the older guys, when I talk on the phone, they want a soft hand, and I see we're using water-based ink. Oh, no, I tried that, hate it. And I still find there's this mentality of it doesn't work, and it dries on the screen. And the new guys, though, they love it. Yeah, so I think that it's the new guys that are probably driving that way. Probably not. You're an old guy, but you're probably driving the push also. But I think it's a very trendy thing, because as doing separations, I get that request every other job. I want a soft hand. They want me to do it in the separations, and I kind of go, well, what are you printing with? Discharge or water base, or what are you using? What's your highest mesh count? Of course, what do they come back and tell me that their highest mesh count is? 140.
110 then.
I had a guy the other day, 110, and it was the same story that, like, you've been hawking the same pitch in your seminars for 30 years. I've been hawking for 30 years. Get rid of your 110 because your supplier sold it to you. This guy told me this story. Well, my supplier said that's all I needed. I thought that whole thing had died off, but I guess not. So anyway. So did you see more water-based at the show being printed?
Well, in the booths that were touting it, I don't think anybody would actually want to print water-based ink at a trade show. That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. But speaking of the little people that are starting out that don't want to spend the money for an oven or a drying unit, so Permaset, another water-based ink company that you always saw in the Michaels stores or the hobbyist stores as a craft item. Dick Blick was always big with Permaset.
Yeah, a little bottle for $5 or whatever.
There you go. The hand paint. You want to hand paint your own and do a few. Permaset owned that market, but water-based is clearly coming out because Permaset hired Joe Hopkins, who knows a little bit about textile screen printing, if you get my meaning. Joe Hopkins pops out there. Richard, I'm the new U.S. rep for Permaset. And I said, the Australian Permaset? Is it? Yep. So the idea that Jesse Martinez and Joe Hopkins are going against it, and here's your pop quiz. Who's the biggest water-based ink supplier in the craft world? Scott?
Probably Dick Blick. No?
Speedball.
Oh, Speedball. Yeah, sorry.
Speedball. We haven't got time for you to answer. So Andy McDougall of Canada, another Academy member with you and I. He's working with the Statesville, North Carolina speedball people to raise their profile and get them out of the dark ages of
You think it'll happen?
45-degree angle wooden screens and in 110 mesh, the Model T of the
How
screen
many
printing
students have
industry.
you had over the years that said, "Well, I got a speedball kit," and you cringe because they probably used to have bichromate for the emulsion, and they had it was.
I am not laughing because downstairs in the basement where I print my friend Gina's hat box lids, it's speedball,
That's
baby.
funny. The kids bought me one for a birthday present years and years ago as kind of a joke. I thought, oh, this is really cool. I'll frame this thing. Hey, before I forget though, let's continue on with the speedball. But Jesse told me that they now have an additive for their water base that lowers the cure temperature, and so it requires less airflow in a dryer. And so they were pushing the small screener who had only an infrared dryer with no real airflow, that they had an additive. And I thought that was interesting because that's going to get the small guys who have the little tiny oven to maybe kind of give it a shot. So I thought that was cool.
I remember in South America adding alcohol in small amounts, which of course makes it very.
Some for here and some for there.
I'm a teetotaler. I'm a
Oh,
teetotaler.
that's right. You are. That's right. Yes.
But you take, I need you to go. When I was in Poland, we wanted to get alcohol to speed up the drying, and you can't just go in the yellow pages. You had to go find some at an apothecary, and alcohol will do that. So I don't know what it's a way to control it. There have always been additives to slow up or retard.
They're really pushing it because they know that that's a negative for those guys. So back to speedball. So Andy's going to try and change the world.
Jesse Martinez and Andy.
McDougal.
I'm sorry, Andy. Andy McDougal and Joe Hopkins. These are real screen printers. They are going to elevate these companies because they are the real thing. They all know their business.
Yeah.
So I'm very pleased. So, I mentioned Charlie Leach here a couple of times, and I'm doing some research work, and I wanted to talk to Charlie Leach, but I haven't seen him in 5 years since he retired. And so I walked up to Joe Catazone at the Union Rutland booth, and I said, Joe, do you know where Charlie Leach is? And he said, no, I haven't heard of him. Now, I know Charlie was running away from
He's
the street.
on the farm somewhere. Him and his wife, Ruth, were doing, this goes back a number of years, doing pond plants and things, and like for koi ponds and things. But isn't Charlie near Cleveland?
I mean, he very well may be, but I want to go find him and interview him and get those secrets out because we're all dying a little too soon.
I was going to say, I don't want nothing to do with screeners anymore. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure he'll talk to me for a couple of hours and give me all of his old stuff.
He was the guy. Those of us who have been around the block knew that Charlie was the guy for water basin. So if you find him, I'd love to talk to him too, But I think he caught the little attitude about the screen printing industry. I think he felt that we ignored him, a little bit. So
well, he couldn't get any traction.
No, but it's funny now because Charlie right now would be in his element because it's going to water base and soft hand. He was just probably 20 years before his time. Don't you think?
So I asked Joe Catazone when I was in the booth,
and for those that don't know, Joe is, what do you think Joe is? National sales manager?
He's the national sales manager for Union.
For Union Rutland or just?
I know.
You never know quite.
I doubt that they'd take him into the fold like that, but I apologize for Joe. I just assume he's the national sales manager for all the Union accounts, as he has been for the last 20 years.
Right.
Right-hand man to Richard LeBeau.
Yeah.
So I asked him if Pavanine, Charlie Leach's baby, was still a thing, because that is the water-based ink that I used out of the bucket. I used all sorts of Union ink, water-based ink. Remember Airtex? It was just something that everybody could use because you didn't need to have an oven. And for real small people, and there's still a market for
push it. You put a little additive in it, and then it would need an oven. And
Sure. Now, Union moved out of their buildings in Ridgefield, New Jersey at the turn of the year and moved everything down to North Carolina, including quite a few key people like Claude, the lab guy that's been there for the last forever years.
You told me that Claude went down there. You kind of think maybe that New Jersey, the people that work there, they probably had family there, and it was very tight knit. And
Claude's the only one that I remember, and I asked about Claude specifically, and Joe told me that Claude lives in South Carolina now. Well, the Pineville is just over the border of North and South Carolina.
Right.
So he moved from New Jersey after so many years. So I look forward to seeing him again soon.
I think Richard will be rolling over in his grave probably with the It'd be, you know, those are people don't know, but Richard Lvov was the owner with his son Daniel of Union, and anybody that ever imitated Richard would go because he was always Scott, come here. You know, so.
Well, the new landlord of that building, Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel was a little different than Richard.
Something else. Something happened. Whatever.
Yeah, who knows? We're moving on. All right, next
So
topic.
in the water-based kind of mentality, somehow the question came up when I were talking to a group of people, and I again mentioned permanent blockout, which is a favorite subject of mine, something I wasn't allowed to pursue. I mean, I was discouraged from pursuing when I was the product manager at Yolano for quite a few years. And
what am I missing? Why would they discourage that? They just didn't.
probably because Yolano didn't sell a permanent blockout, and if you block out the screen once, instead of the 10 to 20 times that you recycle that screen, you stencil removal, you don't sell as much blockout.
Okay, all right. I figured it was something like that.
I love my Yolano Masters and am still obedient, but
yeah.
They don't love it. As a screen printer, I've been touting this, again, for 30 years. I did it in my old big flag screens, and I teach it in every screen printing class. You permanently block out the frame. So, who was listening? The Larsons from Sherlock. Rich Hoffman was there, and he said, you know, I've got ideas about that sort of thing. The Larsons weren't really sure about, well, I don't know that, but they asked me to explain it to them, and I put them together with Greg Marcus of Rhino, who I know sells a permanent blockout that I sold when I was the product manager at Lawson. And anytime I can pursue that, when you think of how much time you save in the 20 recyclings of that screen, and no tape to put on,
I think it's perfect.
No labor.
Yeah. Yeah. So you think Sherlock might offer a panel that's permanently blocked out, or?
I would. I think every screen maker should do it. It was something that I know that I've told every screen maker, like what GM and the guys in Chicago, I've forgotten their name, Graphic Fashions, or you know, any screens that I would get that are, you know, Newman's are a little bit more of a pain in the neck, and that's of course what the Sherlocks are. But a rigid frame. It's just crazy to block it out. It is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Yet, why am I still explaining it 30 years?
You know, some things you just throw out all the time, and people don't listen to it and stuff. So anyway, so you had a little dinner with the heavyweights.
Well, the again, Pierre Yamnishi of the Shirt Board had his annual, well, it's not an annual dinner. He has one at every single show that he's at. And there were at least 35 people. We met at Angelo's for another nice dinner. Angelo's known for their Italian food, and it's only 2 blocks away from the hall. So,
did you go to the White House?
No, I'm not standing in line. It was a nice dinner. It was a nice dinner. Sponsored by M&R, our friends at M&R.
So back up, because I knew that he did that at ISS. So Rich covers the tab.
Rich Hoffman picks up the tab. Good. He's picked up the tab for like 8 or 9 of these get-togethers. Yeah. And this is the first one he's ever been to. And it was definitely old home week. Mark Coudray showed up. Lon Winters and Jason Balish were there. Wow. Our old friend Sam and Jill Wilt were there. Shane Mackey, who I only just met. I'm sorry if I blew your name. And unfortunately, I do not know Shane's partners. I never knew her name, but a lovely screen printing girl who's interested in roller derby, who's an estate attorney in Massachusetts. So I put her together, or at least I introduced her to the great Jeremy Hooley's wife, Lynn Scream Printer Hooley, who's the only other roller derby girl I know who lives in Chicago. But it was
just dinner. I mean, everybody's talking though. I mean,
everybody's talking. The place was loud. And it's a nice dinner to go to. I ate modestly, but I saw some people ordering right over both sides of the menu.
Rich Hoffman's paying for this. This is good.
And I think he must have left a great tip because he left, and the main waitress came back and said, did he leave? The guy in the white shirt? I really wanted to thank him.
Oh, he must have, yeah.
I think Rich was generous to the fault, but you know, I wanted to be at Rich's table. I was with some other people. He told stories about his very first tech call when he was working for Advanced Process. And who do you think that tech call was to? My shop. So he told stories. He told stories about how he was, you know, his first tech call when he worked for Advanced was to come to my shop because I was complaining because I was burning out motors and I was having trouble.
What was the name of your shop then?
Shadow
Oh,
Graphics.
Shadow. Yeah. You said it earlier, broke up.
No, I apologize. That was my shop. He came to Carolina Pacific in Statesville, North
Oh,
Carolina.
okay. Yeah.
And he said the heads were bouncing around faster than he'd ever seen them. The tables were spinning like mad. And of course, I was burning up the brushes. Why? Because I'd gotten in with my little screwdriver and turning up
More
the potato.
power.
They're DC motors. Let's give them
That's funny.
110 volts so that they'll run fast.
Yeah.
He gently and is nice. He's 2 feet taller than I am probably and weighs 100 pounds more than I do. At that time, I used to weigh 130 pounds, which I'm catching up
I think
to
when I
now.
met you, you weighed 130.
I remember him saying, "Well, Richard, you're burning them up because you're taking them." Oh, I understand, and I was properly spanked.
That was his first tech call, though. That's interesting. Who would have thought?
I'm glad to be a member. When he calls my name, I jumped over my table and ran over and stood by Mr. Kudre and heard this story about that. So it's
That's
we're
so
old
funny.
timers now. We're reliving the olden days.
Hey, you
But
saw a lot of the LED screen stuff, which is very trendy, and
I'm
there's 4 players, right?
I'm so excited about the LEDs. I've been listening to it and answering questions about them. I saw LED UV stuff almost 10 years ago when Steve Siegel of UV Process of Chicago would bring in these little diodes. Look, they're making LED diodes that were expensive, only really suitable at that time for curing UV glue or stuff like that. But that was the handwriting on the wall. That was going to be the hot thing. And last year at SGIA in Orlando, 2013, the first models came out. And so Lawson had one, Vastex had one, Rich Hoffman had one, M&R, their Starlight machine, which they put in several different places. And is it Sean Phillips made one for Al Puder up at Northwest Graphics. Mm-hmm. And they were all kind of a little different. And Jeff Baxter told me that they buy more LED, UV modules than anybody else right now. The world's going to catch on fire.
Yeah.
It's a big transition, like laser printers. Remember, and you and I are walking around the print show and saw the first Zante screenwriter. What was that, Rich? And we turned around and went back there, and how many screenwriters did I buy in those years?
Oh, man, they sold thousands. I remember seeing my first inkjet film at a show. I'm going, this is where I want to be. There was I don't know how they got it so dark. I think Baxter showed it to me or something, and I'm thinking, this is it. Now that's kind of pricey though. The M&R machine is.
Well, but you're paying for speed, so
they have the autocoder now, so you can autocode it.
Well, autocoders have been around forever.
But they have that now. They're really pushing this whole pre-press thing. So you got the autocoder, then you got the computer to screen machine, which is what's that? 40 grand or 50 grand or
right?
And then you go. And then now the new machine then inkjets the image and right behind it exposes it.
Right. As the machine goes in and out, as in any screen imager since the old Jeff McHugh's screenjet that he invented 25 years ago, as it comes out, when it's finally finished, it goes in to get imaged, and then when it comes out, it goes underneath a panel, and it's cured.
Yeah.
So you can image a screen in less than 60 seconds. And then you
take it to normal washout or the new.
He's got it. I don't know if it's a new machine, but I only paid attention to it here at the Atlantic City show.
I don't think I've seen it. I mean, it could have been out too, and I would have missed it possibly, but I don't think it. I think
it looks like it's got a sliding screen door, like everybody's got on their patios out there in Arizona. And you put the screen in, it clamps in place. You press a button, it clamps in place. You close it, and it sprays with 8 ounces only of fresh water to get things started. And then it recycles all the water that it's had from then on, it's dirty water, and it sprays from both sides, so you don't have any influx of, it's not spraying just from one, and there's no brushes to do any damage. It's just water spray. Less than 60 seconds, that screen is washed out. 60 seconds to image, expose with Yolano Orange is what they're demonstrating it with. A slower stencil will go slower, and then it's done. You wipe it down with a squeegee, and it's ready. Now, the interesting, important part of this is that the washout's about $27,000 in the new model, and it's $50-something thousand for the eye image. A man, clearly a younger man, is talking with Rich Hoffman, who's doing the demos himself, and the man says, yeah, when I bought mine, I got rid of 3 people. And so I think the world keeps forgetting, as we're trying to have job creators, that every piece of equipment, the automated and better equipment, is a job eliminator. And so it struck me, it is getting rid of jobs, which is what labor saving.
It's a labor intensive part of the business anyway, and so I think it's okay. I mean, that's the problem. That's why I always thought direct to garment would kill screen printing, because you get rid of all the pre-press stuff that just eats up so much time and stuff. So, but now you had commented on that the M&R machine seems to have more of an array, more.
Well, it's got more density of LED lights than, let's say, that the 2 other units that I've used, the Lawson unit and the Vastex unit. I did the most testing of any machine that I've tested when I went to, again, Pierre Yamnishi's Blue Moon, where he had a prototype unit that came from Vastex.
Right.
Now, I did extensive testing on that with my light meters, and I'm very, very impressed. It only has one downside to it, and that is that if you're doing fine lines, lots of thin lines, and put this into context, if you're looking at those lines with a 200 or a 400 power microscope, that there's a wave in the lines. It looks like spaghetti, that it's just got a wave to it. It's very subtle. And for textile printers, this means nothing.
Yeah.
It's just
do you think it's because of the bulbs?
It's an array instead of a single point metal halide.
Yeah. How's a halftone look, though?
Halftones look, I could not beat it. I could not stump it. The halftones were just great.
Yeah. You're an evangelist for this, then. I mean, I know.
Oh, absolutely. And I was an evangelist even before the guys were making it, because I've been trying to do things like this. We were looking, when I worked at Yolanda, we were trying to think of what equipment could we sell. And the LED was, just a twinkle in somebody's eye, but it's the Vastex and the Lawson and the M&R, those guys. Sean Phillips, also at Northwest Graphic, his unit is at an angle, and it's a little different. There are definitely 4 different models, just like there were different cars in the olden days.
Yeah. It's a hot deal. I mean, you got the computer to screen, the LED, the whole thing is really changing. For me, when I was on my DTG kick, I thought screen printing was going to die, and I see screen printing really, making some changes with the water base and everything else. I'm impressed, frankly.
Near the back of the hall was my old friend Rick Roth and his secret weapon, Pam, who I'd never met before, not new, but she was new to me as Mrs. Rick Roth.
He's still mirror image.
He's still mirror image, but he had a thing called the Ink Kitchen. He started a blog about 2 months ago, and he's blogging something every single day. He said that he used to have a blog, but he would blog once a month. And he and Tom Davenport from Motion Graphics, I never met Tom before. I'd never met Pierre Jamnichi from Blue Moon.
All award-winning guys, for those who don't know.
Tom Davenport and Pierre were new guys I'd never met before, and I met them at the Orlando show, and these guys are hot. These guys are into screen printing, and it's been a long time since I met people that really wanted to talk about that instead of talking about dogs or barbecue for myself. So my hobby has always been screen printing, so that's what I want to talk about. I also met a new guy who works with them. It's Casey Ruby, who used to be Mark Echo's lead guy, or, I really didn't get to talk to him enough. But when he was talking with people about his art, he's a very well together, ship-shape guy. I was very impressed with all of them. So Pierre and Tom and Rick are the know-it-alls of the Ink Kitchen, and it's just a newsletter-like blog where they're saying, here's what happens today. So they've got a bad print of the month, or the mistake on Monday, Mistake Monday or something with, oopsie, how did that get through? I know that Pierre and I have one. It's called the basketball print, that when we printed about 20 shirts and then said, it looks kind of odd. Is that how you spell basketball? So,
now these guys had a booth, but they weren't selling anything. So they must have been.
They were showing off Casey's artwork and talking to people and saying, hey, We're just helping. Now, they do have a lot of sponsors. Rick Roth is very good at that. So he's got a full sheet of people that are supporting this blog. So we'll see.
Yeah,
I think you and I should take a lesson in our blogging things on getting those sponsors. He's got
yeah,
one.
yeah. I'll have to work on that. Let me know when you find somebody that has money to sponsor this stuff. But I'm
Now,
surprised they had a booth with no product, which is interesting. So the ISS must have, said here, be nice to have you at the show, and
they might have paid. You don't ask a guy how much he paid for his booth.
right, right, yeah, yeah. Well, it's good to see those guys doing that though. So
They did it in Long Beach, and then he did it in Atlantic City. Now, this is his home turf for Rick Roth. And I think Casey is up in Massachusetts or whatever. And Tom Davenport, he didn't come. He's from Sacramento, California. So I'm sure maybe we'll see them in
Midwest,
Nashville.
but I mean, I know Tom, but I thought he was from the Midwest. I don't know why.
Keep
So
your
your
eye
former
peeled for
employer was Ulano, and you said Ulano has some new goop. I was calling
Oh, my favorite. Well, I'm not wearing my Ulano shirt today, but
oh, come on, man.
So Ulano had new stuff, baby, and the talk of the show. What do you mean, Richard? The talk of the show was the new ink pitcher bucket. When I worked at Ulano, one of the things that Al Gershow asked us to do is find us a bucket that was like a pitcher, so you didn't have drips, just like the Dutch boy paint bucket. And the production people, me with all, whatever context, we looked and looked and looked. We looked for years. And I know that I hated it when Ulano stopped selling screw-on small containers and went to the little peel-off ones. I can't stand those.
Yeah.
I love the screw. So at the show, they had prototypes because the handle was kind of wimpy. But it had a pitcher bucket. Wait.
Let me see the picture here. Easy. Is it called Easy Flow? Oh, okay.
It's easy flow.
Back it up a little. Back it up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, is the emulsion coming in this bucket or the bucket separate? Or this is how they're shipping it?
Emulsion's coming in that bucket.
I love it. We
how do you
talked
get that
earlier. Why
square
wouldn't somebody
box?
have done this 20 years ago? But who knows why?
They had to actually commission the bucket. It's a custom-made bucket, so
Yeah.
like the red bucket trend. We
No
saw
more spilling emulsion on the carpet, or
it's got a lip inside that's actually cleanable, so it's
I love
not
it.
supposed to drip. So we'll see how it works. It looks like a coffee
So
pitcher.
the highlight of the show is the easy flow. There we go.
I'm not saying the highlight of
I
the
know,
show.
I know.
The highlight of the show was some girls that I met at the bar, at Tun's Bar.
That's a different video.
Now, the products are also important. Now, Ulano introduced their Platinum. It's a new Epicure sensitized, and here's going to be the problem. It's a dual cure emulsion that you don't add diazo to it. Ulano's come out with their Epicure methodology that is a diazo replacement, but it still works like a two sensitizer, high speed and low speed sensitized emulsion that is the best. Dual cures are the best for halftones.
They're perfect. That's what I tell people. But I always tell people they have to mix them. So now you're saying it's pre-mixed.
10 years ago, Ulano came out with QX1. And the trouble is that they don't like calling it a hybrid, but it behaves like a dual cure, but it isn't. It's pre-sensitized at the factory.
Right.
So I've got to come up, everybody's got to come up. Ulano has got to come up with a better, cool name. And so a halftone emulsion, or, I haven't thought about it enough to come up with it, but
I like that though. Yeah,
it behaves like a dual cure. I know that Mr. Eisenbeis does not want it called a hybrid, but no diazo, but you get the benefits. And it's not that expensive. It's in the 60s.
hybrid may be a good term for it. I like that. I mean, it's kind of what it is. So anyway, now you aren't sure if they're shipping this yet, or you said they were showing it.
I have seen some on the buckets that I got, but I got secret early copies of it.
And you said it was gray.
It's great. It is better than my go-to emulsion.
No, gray. Gray.
Well, it's gray. Platinum is gray,
Yeah.
which is why they call it platinum,
and
I
gray.
assume. But it's now my go-to half-tone emulsion, which has always been Proclaim EC since they came out with that. Proclaim, they created that product because it reclaimed so well, and it was just amazing how good it was at halftones. It was meant as an Asian product for people that were having a hard time reclaiming, and it just turned out to be just a terrific halftone emulsion.
Yeah.
Now, my favorite pure photopolymer is still QLX because it's cheaper than QTX, but it's got solvent resistance. So there's my Ulano advertisement. But you should look at platinum. It's terrific, and it's new and modern and fast.
Right.
Fast with halftones.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know. I mean, and I'm glad you reported on that. And you said it's gray, so you can see through it better.
Oh yes, for textile people, I used to love TLX because it exposed 20% faster than RLX. But the Asians like RLX because of its color. So
Well, yeah,
I'm a TLX fan from way back. But
clear
the
emulsion
new
for years. You know, so it's strange. So you also found something else in a super hand cleaner. You found the bucket. You found the super hand cleaner.
I this is all I use. Sadi was giving away samples of their Remove
Is there a number on that?
HC8. It's called Remove HC8.
Oh,
It's a hand cleaner. It smells nice, and I think it does a better job than Goop or the orange stuff that I used to use.
That's what Union was pushing for years. Was the what do they call it? The orange stuff with a little bit of pumice in it, and so.
Yeah. Now the only problem, and I gave my friends at Sati, although I didn't see anybody there, although there was a new fellow I'd never seen before with the last name Balfour. I think it was Sam Balfour. So it could be that nepotism going on
Must
at
be.
the. But I said, in the big bottles that I'm buying, the pump doesn't work. I'm sorry, it breaks, and it just doesn't seem to. So they need a little help with the pump, but. This is my absolute favorite hand cleaner for anybody that gets their hands.
Show that again. Show the bottle where I can see it. Remove. Oh yeah, it's a little blurry, but that's good. All right, from Sadi, which probably most Sadi distributors would have that in stock. I would think. Yeah.
They had the table was filled with it, and so there's an apple one, there's a plum one, there's little smelly flavors, good for the ladies in the shop.
Now you notice some of the small label printers out there, which I think is real trendy. For screen printing labels on the back of the shirts rather than having a tag, or screen printing on a sleeve print.
I noticed that, especially the one that what's the name? Reddit Rapid. What's the name?
Rapid Tag.
Okay, so I'd been a lot of times the Rapid Tag stand because I'd seen their booths before, and the machines looked they were homemade. They did the job. They were good machines, but they just looked. They look so much sharper now. So I'm very impressed with how they've improved it. And there's a lot of little companies like this. And why use a big machine to print a little label?
Oh, yeah. And they're fast. I know Bhargav from, what's his graphic in India. He's got one, and it seems to be very trendy. And those things really are fast, and you get loaded fast. Little tiny, probably a 4 or 5 inch print area, maybe is about all they do. Little flash units, like a little mini press, I remember actually Alex, who did Rapid Tag, called me years ago when he first came out. He says, "You want to sell these things?" And I was, I was in my DTG mode. I'm like, "Nah, that screen printing's dead." And he said, "I'll make you a distributor. It's going to be the hottest deal." Nah, Alex. And then I saw that show, and he had people around his booth, just drooling over this machine. So I think it's a real trendy thing. I'm surprised Rich doesn't have one, an M&R, but maybe he's, or Lawson. The boys will make something.
I see it as a, I don't know how many people can make it, but okay.
I wouldn't want to be in the label business.
I wish I had invented it, because I think of how many labels did I have to change, especially when I was manufacturing shirts in Pennsylvania.
I know it, really.
If I'd have just done it and said, this is the way it's going to be, this is the future, but...
Yeah. Rumors are, you actually got interviewed by the boys.
Well, I was walking by the Impressions booth, and I talked, you always have to talk to the Impressions ladies, and then Terry Combs comes up behind me and says, "Richard, can we interview you for the two regular guys?"
Two regular guys. I was thinking two regular guys. It was just Aaron Montgomery.
I'm pretty sure they call it two regular guys. Yeah. So Greg Kitson was being interviewed, and then I went after him, and then Rick Davis came in after me. Rick Davis, who I mentioned earlier, a guy I've known for 30 years in the ink business.
I think it's tworegularguys.com. It's on my I have a link on my website to it. They do it every Friday, other than they do it at shows. But Aaron and Terry, who worked for me for at least 10 years, and really bonded over chicken wings. That's how, if you see the picture of the two regular guys are eating wings, because they had a thing called the Wings World Tours. So anyway, but that's a cool deal. I'm glad Impressions hooked up with them. They do it out of the Impressions booth, and it's a cool deal. I think Impressions needs that kind of a get to know, like they're doing with Rick Roth, probably, so that's cool.
Well,
Rumor mill, you said something about Pocono Screen Supply.
I walked up to the Pocono Screen Supply booth and asked, this is the East Coast. Did Brian Cobb come to the show? And I sort of got that, that look. He said, well, Brian
Did he
doesn't
die?
anymore. And he was, in fact, he was actually at the show. I missed him. He used to be, I haven't seen him in 10 years, but I had to buy some mesh, and I spent my money with him just last year, and I sent him some notes along, and I just wanted to say, hey, I just wanted to say hello. And so it's just changed hands, and there's a new guy that owns it.
Yeah.
And they make screens. They should be using permanent blockout in their.
Damn right. You need to talk to those guys about that. So anyway.
In new booths, I talked about Matsui. Maybe Permaset had one. Maybe Joe was just walking around. But Badger Sportswear, who I used to do business with when I was at Carolina Pacific in Statesville, North Carolina, where Speedball is, they had a booth, and I don't think I ever remember seeing a Badger Sportswear booth, because they just said Badger, didn't say Badger Sportswear, and
it was back so long ago.
It was just interesting.
Yeah,
so.
and you hung with our good friend Eric from Action.
I had dinner with Eric Naftel and his crew from Action Engineering.
Did he ever tell you about his side business?
I don't know about the side business. What are you talking about?
He may not do it anymore, but he I think he plays musician, and he made a thing called the BAM stand that was a totally different, and it was a music holder. We had him on our company band because Eric gave him to us years ago. Had a place to hold your drink, had a light on it, and it was it folded up, and it was a whole different business he had. I don't think he sold many of them because they were like $200 for a music stand. But we had a whole set of them because Eric provided them, and I think that's a little side business, and maybe it's fallen to the wayside. But for those that don't know, Eric is Mr. What would you call him? Mr. Pallet?
Mr. Aftermarket Platins. Yeah, I would never call him pallets.
He's the guy. I'm sorry. Platin. He calls them Platins. Yeah. He must be an engineer, though, because of all his stuff is so nicely made. I mean, gosh, it's just really, really nicely done, I think.
Well, it's interesting as you describe that, because at the dinner, we have a lot of stories about the startup days, how'd you get started and whatever, and I had no idea that Eric toured with Bill Wayner in the olden days.
For those that don't know Bill Wayner, I think Bill's a country western singer because Eric toured with him. Bill Wayner was like ultimate screen printer.
Mr. Oval. Bill Wayner was one of the very earliest people doing full color process on ovals, which was a very difficult thing to do. He's the man that discovered Fred Clark in Dallas, Texas. We wouldn't have Fred if Bill hadn't found him. He did an awful lot of work with precision. He was a precision guy, and until he retired to Kaplan, Louisiana, we haven't seen him at shows for 20 years now.
It's been a long time.
And Bill was the master. He was a master printer. He and his wife would travel around. He never flew, and he would go into your shop and completely rebuild your oval in less time than most people could, just change a motor out.
Kind of like the God, I think, for a long time there,
Yeah, and
but Eric worked with him. I didn't know that. You didn't know it. Eric.
So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
We were actually talking about things like sustained printing speeds, and I talked about the greatest thing about Louisiana, in Kaplan especially, Kaplan, Louisiana, was Garin. And Garin is a company that is one of those quiet back, not a splashy company. But I remember going to Garin and dealing with Newman roller frame problems, but I was just amazed because the biggest problem with an automatic press is to keep it running and don't stop. And I would watch the Garin presses go on, and they wouldn't stop. And they're printing those football designs with lots of big sheet. They were really good printers. They just seemed to wreck their Newman roller frames by jamming them into something. But their printing was fantastic, and they would go for hours without stopping. They were serious printers. So we talk about that. And, of course, the most heartfelt discussion I had at the entire show was to tell the boys about Angela Jones of South Print and Chase Bag in Reidsville, North Carolina, because Angela Jones was the greatest loader there ever was. And I said, I haven't heard from her in years. I haven't seen her in ages. She's not coming to shows anymore. But Angela Jones could load and take off 1,200 pieces an hour.
That's an amazing
by
loader.
herself.
What do you think the average is? Probably 400 or 500 for a lot of shops on a good day. I mean, just the production rate.
She was loading bags, so there's a different kind of they're heavier or whatever. But when Angela got Precisions, they did not tell her that you should have a takeoff person. And she invented an over ramp that went over the dryer belt, and that's where she stacked up the bags. It was a big Formica table that went across. And so there'd be a stack of, let's say, 50 bags, and she'd load a bag and then take it one off, drop it on the belt, and just reach back a little bit more and grab another one.
Almost like loading, but unloading at the same time. I love it.
Everybody at the table, their eyes got big. They went, "Oh, no, there's no way, 1,200 an hour." Look into my eyes, 1,200 an hour, and every one of her crew, her loaders, all females, so I'm very bigoted. Every one of them could load 1,200 an hour, and Angela could run the shop. Hey, what are you doing over there? While she was doing it, there's nobody, never been anybody like her. There never will be another person like her.
So Angela, if you're watching this, contact us.
She was the best.
To the Hall of Fame, you know. So,
now somebody told me she's not at South Print anymore, Butch Hamlet's place.
She could love the industry. You know, people come and go. You mentioned you bumped into.
See, the best thing is so I told those stories, and I said Charlie Taublieb is here at the show, and later on that day, Charlie is actually talking to Eric. It couldn't have been any better. I interrupt them. I elbow my way in and I said, "Charlie, tell me about Angela Jones." And Charlie went on for 20 minutes about the superstar that Angela Jones was.
She's a legend.
She should be a legend. She should be more of a legend. I look at these guys that are winning the loading contest with M&Rs and stuff like that. But those of us that know, the real hero, the pioneer, is Angela.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's an amazing story. You bumped into Greg Kitson, and you said Greg is putting together some sort of a deal.
The big group that was one of the most important reasons that I actually went to Atlantic City was to support Greg Kitson's group of 20. Greg Kitson is taking some of the, let's say, the pages from the book of W. Edwards Deming and Duran, guys that went to Japan after World War II and helped them. So these quality control circles, one of the things that he talks about was that they created a group of 20 people, 20 companies, to share their business knowledge secretly, but also share the ratios and things like that. So bigger and smaller companies could learn from each other. Craig told a story about the Suzuki company, and when they came to the United States, their distributors, there were big ones that were winning and guys that weren't winning. And so when they got together in different regions, they would share information. And Greg Kitson, Mark DeBarrow of Flying Colors, in a client and friend of mine right here about 40 minutes away in Canton, Michigan, Detroit, and of course Pierre Yamnishi again of the Shirt Board. They created this group, which they want to sell memberships in. It's going to cost about $100 a month. They've been meeting themselves privately. They've been talking it up on the Shirt Board, the forum that started after, for instance, your board folded up. They started a board afterward. He and Andy Maines and Dot Tone Dan Campbell own that board. But it's about business. It's not about technical things, the things that I'm most interested in, but I'm really trying to do everything I can to try and support it. I think it's a real good idea. Anybody who knows Greg Kitson and the things that he teaches, he is the guy who knows more about what's happening in his business than anybody else.
He knows the numbers. Yeah, he's a very, I would say Greg's probably anal kind of a guy, which is good. He's
good.
Yeah. And they're going to do a thing at Nashville, ISS?
This is all leading up to gathering some people together to have a real talk. Mark Coudray came to the meeting. Marcia Derryberry, who's the seminar sort of controller for Impressions and the editor of Impressions magazine, they're going to have an actual room. They're partnering with Impressions at Nashville to see how this works. So there are going to be some expenses. But their plan is to bring in technical speakers in the morning, but also teach people how we can all get on the same page of their businesses. Charts of accounts will be taught by Mark DeBarrow, who is I think he's got a degree in CPA. He's a CPA of some sort,
Yeah.
and he knows this stuff as Greg Kitson does. So I'm real enthused about it.
You're going to be at ISS, Atlantic City.
Yep.
I mean, Nashville.
Yeah, Nashville is
You're going to come down
where
to
it's going to
Bowling Green and
start.
hang with me for a
So
couple of days.
I'm going early to go hang out with you in Bowling Green, and then I'm going on to attend these classes. I'm not a guy that's actually going to do it, but I'm putting my full support behind it. So I'm encouraging people. It's going to cost $100 a month, so it's going to be serious people that want to improve their business part. The idea that Mr. Kudray came and was very, very helpful. We also got people that have been involved in this, Sam and Jill Wilt from Palomar. Again, Shane Mackey and his girlfriend, who I apologize, I don't remember. I don't think I ever knew her name.
Is there a name for this group yet? Do you know?
He's calling it the group of 20. Something like
be more than 20, but it's the group of 20.
Well, no, when there's 20 people, he'll start another group.
Oh, then it'd be the second group of 20A.
And the organizers are not there. You know, Kitson and Mark DeBarrow and Pierre are not really there to, they'll organize it, but they need the membership because it's you got to have a room. You got to bring somebody in to talk on various subjects. So let them pitch it more than me, but it's a business oriented group. It's not like a karetsu, but it's definitely an organized study group.
I'll have to check it out when I go there. I'm looking forward to Nashville because Nashville's a great city for the show. Hey, did we cover all of our talking points? We had kind of a list here. I think we covered.
That's it.
This is the most extensive report I've ever had on a show, and I really appreciate that. I'm looking forward to hanging with you in Bowling Green, by the way, this summer, and then we'll go down to Nashville and we'll hockey talk. You'll drink an iced tea, and I'll drink whatever the drink of the day is down there.
Better barbecue. I cannot find good barbecue in Detroit at all.
Oh man, they've got Risky's and they got all kinds of places down there. I mean, it's like the barbecue capital. So you've been to Nashville before.
I've been in Nashville a couple of times. The last time was the Printwear show, which is what, 95 or something.
A long time ago, yeah. It probably hasn't changed a lot then. Every other place is a bar with a band, so. Anyway, Richard, I've enjoyed talking with you. You know that, and it's always good to see you. And I really appreciate your input on the show. And I'll catch up with you in beautiful Bowling Green, and then Nashville. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.